Welcome back, deep divers. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into something pretty mind-bending, conceptual dipoles in cybernetics.
Yeah, we'll be drawing mainly from Christopher Regan's work. He's kind of a leading figure in cybernetics these days, and he uses conceptual dipoles as a tool, like a lens, to look at complex systems and how we understand them.
Okay, so conceptual dipoles, sounds well, a little intimidating, to be honest.
Maybe, haha. But they're pretty straightforward once you wrap your head around them. Think of like pairs of concepts that seem to kind of complement or oppose each other.
Like what?
Like, well, linearity and circularity, for instance.
Yeah.
Or like form and process. These are what we call conceptual dipoles. And Regan, he points out that these pairings, they're all over the place, not just in, academic stuff, but in everyday life too.
Okay, so is it kind of like two sides of the same coin, like two
Oh,
different ways of looking at a concept?
Exactly. You got it. And Regan argues that one side of the dipole, it tends to be easier to grasp, to define, like, neatly packaged and formalized. He calls this the stronger side. And then the other side, the weaker side, it's harder to pin down, more elusive, less obvious. But, and this is important, focusing on that weaker side, that's where the really depth understanding lies.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like, we're always looking for those easy answers, the clear-cut categories, and maybe we miss, we miss those more subtle, complex aspects that could tell us so much more.
Right. And Regan, he argues that if we ignore this weaker side, we can get stuck in a really limited reductionist view of the world. Like we miss all the connections, the feedback loops, the emergent properties that make systems truly complex.
So how do we actually use these conceptual dipoles in a practical way? I'm curious about, how they can be used to explore specific fields or ideas.
Sure. One area Regan really dives into is cognitive science. He uses these dipoles to analyze different schools of thought within the field, like cognitivism, connectionism, and action.
Whoa, those are some big words. Can we break those down a bit?
Yeah, of course. Let's start with cognitivism. So this approach, it sees the mind as kind of an information processing machine, almost like a computer.
Okay, so it's all about like logic, rules, step-by-step processes.
Exactly. And Regan, he'd say that cognitivism, it tends to focus on the form side of the form process dipole. It's all about representations, symbols, the structure of knowledge.
All right, got it. What about connectionism?
So connectionism, it takes its cues from the structure of the brain, all those networks of neurons. It's the foundation for a lot of what we see in artificial intelligence today.
So like neural networks. So this approach is all about the process side of the dipole, right?
Now that's where it gets really interesting. Regan, he suggests that these connectionist models, even though we often associate them with AI, which can seem kind of mechanistic, they can help us understand the processual aspect of how we think.
Hold on. So the same models that are driving AI, they can also help us understand those less formalized, more dynamic parts of the human mind.
Exactly. It all comes down to, how we interpret them and use them. Connectionism, it highlights, dynamic interactions, emergent properties, and it shows us that, well, that thinking isn't just about like static representations, but ongoing processes.
That is pretty cool. It kind of challenges the idea that, AI and a deeper understanding of our own minds are somehow at odds, right?
Right. And then there's Enaction. That's the third approach Regan
okay.
analyzes. And Enaction, it really emphasizes the embodied and situated nature of cognition. It argues that how we understand the world is shaped by our interactions with it.
So it's not just about like what's happening in our heads, but about how our bodies, our actions, and our experiences out in the world, all of that influences how we think.
You got it. It's about how we enact our understanding through our engagement with the world.
Okay, so we've got cognitivism focusing on form, connectionism highlighting process, and then inaction emphasizing embodiment. I'm starting to see how Regan uses these conceptual dipoles to shed light on different facets of how we think.
And the cool thing is it doesn't stop there. Regan, he believes that understanding these dipoles can also help us understand our own individual thinking processes.
No, that's what I'm talking about. I love practical application.
Yeah.
So how do we actually apply this to our own lives and our own thinking?
Well, one way is to start paying attention to the tension, to the push and pull between those dipoles in your own thinking. Like, do you tend to favor linear thinking, or do you lean more towards circular thinking? Are you more drawn to explanations, or are you more drawn to interpretations?
Well, I got to say, I'm definitely a linear thinker. I like things to be, clear and straightforward. But I can see how a more circular approach, one that embraces, feedback loops and unexpected connections, that could be really valuable.
Exactly. And recognizing those tendencies in yourself, that's the first step towards cultivating what Reagan calls second order rationality.
Okay, second order rationality, that sounds important, but I think I need a little more explanation on what that actually means.
Sure. So second order rationality, it's about moving beyond just accepting information at face value. It's about becoming more aware of, the underlying assumptions and biases that shape our thinking. It's about recognizing the limits of our own perspective and being open to different ways of seeing the world.
So it's kind of like taking a step back and examining the thought process itself,
Yeah.
becoming more conscious of how we arrive at our conclusions.
Exactly. And that's where the power of these conceptual dipoles really comes in by recognizing those opposing forces, those weaker sides that we often overlook. We can start to challenge our own assumptions and expand our mental
My mind
horizons.
is already stretching a little bit. This
Yeah.
is definitely giving me a new perspective on how I think.
And we're just getting started. We've only scratched the surface of how Riggan uses these dipoles to explore cognitive science and our own ways of thinking.
I can't wait to dive deeper. This is already blowing my mind. So what's next on our cybernetic adventure?
So Reagan, he doesn't just leave us hanging with these abstract concepts. He actually gives us some practical tools to work with these dipoles and cultivate, that second order rationality we were talking about.
Oh, I love a good tool. Give me something I can actually use, put this stuff into practice.
Okay. Well, one tool he talks about is the exploratory dialectical dialogic. Sounds
Mhm.
kind of fancy, but it's actually a pretty simple idea. It's about, engaging in a dialogue, a back and forth with those opposing poles, those concepts, and the key is to explore those nuances, those different sides without trying to, force a resolution to pick a winner.
So instead of choosing a side or rushing to find a compromise, we just kind of sit with that tension between the two sides and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's about letting that tension, letting it guide our exploration,
Yeah.
It helps us see the concept in a whole new light. Reagan, he uses this method to analyze, those different schools of thought in cognitive science. Like, instead of seeing cognitivism and Enaction as totally separate and incompatible, this dialogic approach, it lets you see how they each highlight different but important aspects of the mind.
That makes sense. It's like each perspective gives you a piece of the puzzle, and it's through that tension between them that you actually get the whole picture.
Exactly. And Reagan believes we can use this dialogic approach not just for, academic fields, but also for our own personal beliefs, our own understanding of how the world works.
That's super useful. I know
Yeah.
I know I'm guilty of like getting attached to certain ideas and just, dismissing others that seem contradictory.
We all do it. It's natural. But this exploratory dialectical dialogic, it encourages us to, resist that urge to just quickly categorize ideas as right or wrong. Instead, it invites us to hold those seemingly opposite viewpoints in our minds and see what happens when we let them interact.
That's definitely a challenge, but I can see how it could lead to a much richer understanding. Are there any other tools Reagan talks about that can help us do this?
Yeah, he also brings up this concept of the ambijective gesture. It's a way to visualize this shift from a basic understanding to a more nuanced, second order perspective.
I love a good visualization. So paint me a picture of this ambijective gesture.
Okay, so imagine you have a circle, right? And that represents the object. And then you have a square, and that represents the subject, the observer. So in a basic understanding, we see them as separate, like disconnected things. The object is out there, and we're over here trying to make sense of it.
Okay, got it. So far, so good. It's like we're reaching out to the object with our minds, trying to trying to grasp it.
Right. But the ambijective gesture, it takes it a step further. We then draw another line, and this line leaps back from the object to the subject, acknowledging that our understanding is always shaped by our own perspective, our own experiences.
Ah, so it's like a two-way street. We're not just, passively observing the object. We're in a relationship with it.
Yeah.
Like our understanding is something we create together. Us and the thing we're trying to understand.
You got it. And that's a really key principle in second order thinking. It's recognizing that knowledge isn't just about, objectively knowing something out there. It's about recognizing how our own subjectivity, how we see things, how we experience things, all of that plays a role in shaping what we know.
That is a huge shift in perspective. So this ambijective gesture, it's a reminder to always consider both sides of the equation, the object itself and our own subjective experience of it.
Exactly. And that's where those conceptual dipoles come in again. There's this tension between the object and the subject, the form and the process, the explanation and the interpretation, the ambijective gesture. It encourages us to embrace that tension and explore it instead of trying to get rid of it.
I'm starting to see how all of this fits together. It's like we're weaving this tapestry of understanding, and those conceptual dipoles, they're like the threads that they create this richer, more nuanced picture.
That's a beautiful analogy. And Riggin, he doesn't stop there. He also talks about, computer simulations and how they can play a role in helping us understand complex stuff.
Simulations, that's interesting. How do those fit into all of this?
Well, he argues that simulations can help us explore those weaker sides of the dipoles, those processes that are harder to grasp, to pin down just by thinking about them. Mm-hmm. By creating a model, a simulation, we can actually observe how those processes play out, how they interact with other elements, and how they create those emergent properties that we might not be able to see just by thinking about it.
So it's like we're using computers to kind of externalize those elusive parts of reality that are hard to wrap our heads around just by thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Riggin, he goes even further than that. He says that the very act of engaging with a simulation, understanding it, even though it's in the digital realm, it can actually change how we think.
So it's not just about the results of the simulation, it's about the process of interacting with it.
Exactly. By working with these models, we start to develop this more intuitive grasp of how complex systems work, how those processes unfold, how those emergent properties, how they come about.
That makes sense. It's like learning a new language, right? Yeah. The more you immerse yourself in it, the more you start to think differently.
Right, and those insights that we get from simulations, we can then apply them to how we understand other complex systems, including our own thinking processes.
I mean, this is fascinating. So we're using technology not just to model the world, but to actually expand our own cognitive abilities, our own understanding of ourselves and the complex systems we're all a part of.
That's the power of this approach. It's about going beyond abstract intellectual analysis and really engaging with complexity in a more embodied experiential way.
And that brings us back to something we touched on earlier, this idea of embodiment in cybernetics.
Yeah, absolutely. Rian, he really emphasizes that cybernetics, it goes beyond just thinking about stuff. It recognizes that our bodies, our lived experiences, all of that, it shapes how we know things. He even suggests that technology, especially computing technology, it's like an externalized gesture, a way for us to extend our own embodiment into the digital world.
That's such an interesting way to think about technology. So it's not just about creating machines that can do things for us. It's about creating tools that let us experience the world in new ways, and in that process to understand ourselves better.
Exactly. And by using those technologies, by engaging with those simulations, with those models, we're not just messing around with data. We're engaging with this processual dimension. We're exploring those parts of reality that are hard to grasp just through thinking alone.
This makes me think about how, how we often think of technology as this thing that's separate from us,
Yeah.
something that's either going to save us or destroy us. But what you're saying is that technology can actually help us connect more deeply with ourselves and with the world around us.
That's a really important point, and it's something that Regan he explores through this concept of pharmacon.
Pharmacon,
Yeah.
the word that can mean both cure and poison, right?
Exactly. And Regan uses this concept to describe the processual dimension itself. He argues that this elusive dynamic aspect of reality, it's what gives our lives meaning, depth, purpose.
Okay, so I see the cure part of it.
Yeah.
But how is the processual dimension also a poison?
Well, because it's so elusive, so hard to grasp, it can also lead to, confusion, anxiety, even despair. Like think about all the uncertainty and ambiguity we face in life, right? Those experiences can be really overwhelming if we don't have the tools to deal with them.
So it's like the very thing that gives our lives meaning
Mm.
can also be a source of suffering if we don't know how to work with it.
That's the tension that Regan is highlighting, and he believes that cybernetics can help us navigate this tension to embrace the cure while
Mhm.
mitigating the poison.
That sounds like a pretty powerful skill to develop. So how do we actually do that? How do we embrace this processual dimension without getting lost in all the ambiguity?
Well, this is where those tools we were talking about earlier, they come in, the exploratory dialectical dialogic that can help us, engage with that tension between the cure and the poison and the ambijective gesture. It reminds us to acknowledge our own role in shaping how we understand things.
So it's about finding a balance, right?
Yeah.
A way to hold those two poles in tension without letting one overwhelm the other.
Exactly. It's about finding that middle way, that sweet spot between the extremes, and it's a journey, not a destination. Cultivating this kind of this second order rationality, it's an ongoing process, a way of being in the world that embraces complexity, that embraces change.
This is giving a lot to think about. It's like we've been given this whole new set of lenses to view the world through.
And that's what Regan's work is all about. It's about expanding our capacity to understand both the world around us and ourselves.
Yeah. I'm really eager to see where this exploration takes us.
Mhm.
What other insights does Regan offer?
Well, he goes on to talk about how these conceptual dipoles can actually be used to understand and even generate, new concepts, entirely new
Oh
ideas.
wait, generating new concepts? That sounds almost like magic. How is that even possible?
It's not magic, but it does involve a shift in perspective. Remember how we talked about how focusing on the weaker side of the dipole can lead to deeper understanding? Well, Reagan suggests that we can use this same principle to create new ideas.
So by exploring the less obvious, the less formalized aspects of a concept, we kind of open ourselves up to new possibilities.
Exactly. It's like we're shining a light into those shadowy corners of our understanding, revealing connections and possibilities that we might have missed otherwise.
This is really interesting. Can you give me an example of how this might actually work?
Sure. Think about the concept of intelligence, right? Traditionally, we've defined intelligence in pretty narrow terms. We focus on things like logical reasoning, problem-solving abilities, academic achievement.
Right. It's like we created this very, very limited box for what counts as intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. But what if we start exploring the weaker side of that dipole? Those aspects of intelligence that are harder to measure, to quantify. Things like emotional intelligence, creativity, the ability to connect with other people on a deeper level.
Those are all incredibly important parts of being human, but they don't always get recognized as forms of intelligence.
Right, and that's where the power of this approach comes in. By expanding our definition of intelligence, by recognizing those weaker sides, we open up this whole new range of possibilities for understanding human potential.
This is really making me rethink my own assumptions about intelligence. It's like we've been limiting ourselves by clinging to this narrow definition.
Exactly. And Regan argues that we can apply this principle to any concept we encounter by exploring those weaker sides, those less obvious aspects. We can not only deepen our understanding, but we can also create entirely new concepts that better reflect the complexity of reality.
This is mind-blowing. It's like we're being given permission to challenge the status quo, to think outside the box, and to create new ways of understanding the world.
Exactly, and that's the exciting potential of cybernetics. It's not just about studying complex systems. It's about becoming more active participants in how knowledge is created.
I am officially a cybernetics enthusiast. This is giving me a whole new way of looking at the world, one that embraces complexity, one that values subjective experience, and one that empowers us to create new knowledge.
And the journey continues. We've still got more to explore in Regan's work. He has some really interesting insights on how cybernetics can help us, navigate the challenges of the 21st century. He says one of the biggest challenges we face today is the sheer speed and complexity of change. Like it's getting harder and harder to make sense of everything that's happening, to predict what's going to happen next, and to make decisions with any kind of confidence.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. It does often feel like the world is like spinning faster and faster, and it's tough to keep up.
Exactly. And Regan, he thinks this is where cybernetics can really offer us a valuable perspective. He reminds us that complex systems, whether they're, social systems, technological systems, ecological systems, they're constantly evolving and adapting. They're not static. We can't just control them or predict what they're going to do with any kind of certainty.
So instead of trying to impose our will on these systems, we need to learn to work with them, to adapt to their ever-changing nature.
That's a key insight. And Regan suggests that this requires us to shift our thinking, to move away from those linear cause and effect models and towards a more cyclical, process-oriented understanding of how change actually happens.
Right. It's like trying to steer a boat in a raging river, right?
Yeah.
You can't just point it in one direction and expect to get where you want to go. You have to constantly be adjusting your course, responding to the currents, the eddies as they come up.
That's a perfect analogy, and Regan believes that this adaptive, process-oriented thinking, it's essential for navigating the complexities of the world we live in today.
So how do we actually cultivate this way of thinking? Are there any specific practices or techniques that can help us become more adaptable, more responsive to change?
Well, Regan, he emphasizes those tools we were talking about earlier, the exploratory dialectical dialogic, the ambijective gesture, the use of computer simulations. These tools can help us, to embrace that complexity, to challenge those assumptions, and to develop a more nuanced, a more sophisticated understanding of the world.
It's like we're building a toolkit for navigating complexity,
Yeah.
right? A set of mental and technological resources that can help us make sense of things, help us find our way through all the chaos.
Exactly. And he also emphasizes the importance of embodiment in this process. He reminds us that we're not just these disembodied minds trying to make sense of the world from a distance. We're embodied beings. We're deeply interconnected with the world around us.
So it's not just about thinking differently, it's about experiencing differently.
Exactly. And Wiegand believes that by paying attention to our bodily sensations, to our emotions, to our intuition, all of that, we can gain these really valuable insights into the complex systems that we're a part of.
This is making me think about the importance of mindfulness and other practices that help us become more aware of our embodied experience. It's like we need to tap into the wisdom of our of our bodies, not just the logic of our minds.
That's a really powerful insight, and he would definitely agree. He sees embodiment as a key part of cultivating that second order rationality we talked about. It's about recognizing that our understanding of the world is shaped not just by our thoughts, but also by our feelings, our senses, our interactions with the environment, with everything around us.
I think this is starting to really click for me. It's like cybernetics is offering us this path towards a more holistic, a more integrated way of being in the world,
Hmm.
one that values both our intellectual and our embodied experience.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and I think that's one of the most important takeaways from Riggan's work. Cybernetics, it's not just a set of theories or concepts. It's a way of life. It's a way of approaching the world with curiosity, with humility, with a willingness to embrace all that complexity.
This deep dive it's been truly transformative. I feel like I've been given this whole new set of tools for understanding the world, for understanding my place in it.
I'm so glad to hear that, and I hope this is just the beginning of your cybernetic journey.
It definitely is. I'm excited to explore these ideas further and to see how I can apply them to my own life.
And remember, the beauty of cybernetics is that it's an ongoing process of exploration and discovery.
Hmm.
There's always more to learn, more to understand, more to create.
Well, I can't thank you enough for guiding us through this fascinating landscape of ideas. And to our listeners, we encourage you to dive deeper into Chrissy Ruggan's work and discover the power of cybernetics for yourselves. It's a journey that will challenge your assumptions, expand your horizons, and empower you to navigate the complexities of our ever-changing world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.